Ladies and gentlemen, our final plenary session, entitled Green Investment, Brighter Futures, Financing Sustainable Development, will shed light on how significant environmental challenges, but also a tremendous opportunity to build a more sustainable future. This talk will delve into the world of green investment, exploring how they can unlock a brighter future by supporting sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our panelist speakers and moderator to the stage.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to everyone. Still feeling sleepy? Come, let's try one more round. A very good afternoon to everyone. Wonderful. So I'm Dr. Dinah Jayasawari, fondly known as Dr. D. Or you can call me Didi, like what my boss always calls me. And I'm excited to moderate our plenary 2 today, titled as Green Investments, Brighter Futures, Financing Sustainable Development. Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of United Nations, once said, "The central challenge which we face in the world today is pretty much making globalization be a positive force." Would you agree? Do you know why he said that? Simply because not everyone enjoys the luxury of globalization. Just as what Mr. James pointed out just now, there are still that percentage of people who remain in squalor. And it is our responsibility to embrace SDG as a means to bring equality to all. Wouldn't you agree? Wonderful. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our lovely panelists present today with us. Firstly, on my far right, Tuan Syed Kamal Muzaffar, Syed Hassan Sagaf. He is the Director of Sustainability Division from Malaysian Investment Development Authority, also known as MIDA. Tuan Syed Kamal Muzaffar, despite looking very strict, is actually a lovely gentleman. Nice smile, by the way. He has spent more than 20 years in the oil, gas, and petrochemicals industry, be it in marketing and trading, commodities, downstream business, as well as strategic planning and various business development sectors. In his current position in MIDA, he is responsible for formulating strategies to promote sustainable investments in line with our government's policy frameworks and roadmaps. Next, just next to me, we have Ms. Chetna Harish, who is the Associate Partner, Malaysia Climate Change and Sustainability Services of Ernst & Young Consulting Sdn Bhd. Chetna Harish currently overlooks the integration of sustainability and climate risk management into corporate strategies. Over her 13-year career span, Chetna has led transformative projects across various sectors, including power, utilities, manufacturing, and healthcare. Her work involves developing long-term sustainability pathways, climate scenario modeling, and aligning corporate strategies with science-based targets. And what is very interesting about Chetna is that she has contributed to the creation of EY Malaysia's Climate Risk Barometer and has played a crucial role in enhancing EY's annual Global Climate Barometer for the Malaysian entities. And last but not least, we have a very, very special panelist who has dialed in right from New York. There she is. I am so happy to introduce to you Madam Nurliza binti Hashim, who is the CEO of Urbanize Malaysia. Nurliza Hashim is the CEO of Urbanize Malaysia, and she's also the founder of AJM Planning and Urban Design. She leads the organization in the implementation of sustainable urbanization policies for Malaysian cities as well as regions by sharing knowledge, community-based programs, innovative urban solutions, research development, as well as collaborative partnership. Her expertise has been instrumental in the development of blueprints, contributing towards Malaysia's nation building, including the National Physical Plans, Putrajaya Master Plan, Iskandar Malaysia Comprehensive Development Plan, Kuala Lumpur Structure Plan, City Plan policies, as well as low-carbon cities and smart city planning. So let's give all our three panelists a big round of applause. When we say green investment, what comes to mind? What do you think is the heart of the matter? Any takers? Well, to me, coming from social science background, it's basically about ensuring allocation of sufficient resources across all sectors, be it private as well as public. And interestingly, how to make it be available not just at a local scale, but also at a global scale, with fair share and fair respect to equality. So to kickstart, can we see a show of hands? How many of you already have at least some clue about how green investments work? No hands, so nobody has a clue. No worries. I would like to ask each of the panelists to take about 5 minutes to express their thoughts regarding this topic we have today with us. We will first start with Tuan Syed Kamal Muzaffar. He will be presenting about MIDA's role in promoting sustainable investment and green growth in Malaysia. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. D. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I was struggling to put the 57 years commitment of MIDA in building the nation in 5 minutes. It's not easy. But nevertheless, let me try. We'll talk about this green investment, brighter future, financing sustainable development. And first thing first, I think you need to know MIDA, for those who are not aware about MIDA. So, basically, MIDA is the premier government's principal investment agency in promoting direct investment, the FDIs or DDIs into the country. That's our role. We were established in 1967. We are now 57 years today. And we have brought in more than 5,000 MNCs and big international corporations to the country for the past 50 over years. So our roles are basically we do the planning, we do the promotion, and we do the processing evaluation as well as implementation and facilitation for the investment, the foreign direct investment as well as domestic direct investments. And we are present in 21 locations abroad. We have 3 offices in USA, in Europe, China, Japan, Korea, India, Singapore, Sydney. And we have offices in all states in Malaysia except for Perlis, it's a joint with Kedah. And at MIDA HQ also, we have one center, we call it Invest Malaysia Facilitation Center, where we have all the government technical agencies to facilitate investors to invest in the country. Okay, on this sustainability or sustainable investment, MIDA set up a dedicated unit. We call it Sustainable Division. I'm heading that unit with a small team. And we are advocating the adoption of technology as well as ESG practices among the industry players. We formulate and implement the roadmap and necessary intervention to support the adoption of ESG among the SMEs and MTCs. And we also facilitate and reach out to the companies and industry players to educate them to have greater understanding of what they need to do when it comes to ESG practices in their business operation. Okay, these are among other things that we do as part of our reach out programs. We organize seminars, roundtable discussions, and as we also do visitation to overseas to do benchmarking, as we identify suitable investors to come to the country. Okay, this now we go straight to what MIDA is doing with regard to promoting investment, sustainable investment. So in line with the new investment master plan 2030, there are 4 key identified missions in promoting investment, and one of them is push for net zero. This is in line with the government's aspirations towards net zero by 2050. In doing so, we want industry players to enhance their ESG practices. Okay, and we also developed this SDG investor map together with UNDP and MITI to look at where are the areas of investment that investors should consider to invest in Malaysia. It is in the finance, technology, communication, RE, food, F&B, infrastructure, and healthcare. So this is just a broad-based scope of investment that investor may consider to invest in Malaysia within this sustainable development growth. And going forward, and in fact we have been doing this, we are more to ecosystem approach in promoting ESG practices and technology adoption among the industry players. Okay, just I want to show there's so many opportunities for the local companies particularly to participate in this sustainable investment scope. You see, there's huge fund for the, we call it ESG mandated fund, allocated by the respective GLICs, GLCSF as well private entities. They're going to invest into the sustainable projects such as RE, bioenergy, integrated waste management, so on and so forth. So when they are doing their investment, physical investment, we come to MIDA for the facilitation, for the license, and for the incentive, whatnot. And MIDA will also assist the SMEs to be part of this supply chain for these big projects. So you see, this is the entire ecosystem where the local companies can participate in the sustainable investment projects. Okay, and there are many incentives, fundings, and financing available for the industry players, particularly SMEs. For MIDA, we have a government allocation under GITA, the Green Income Tax Allowance, is tax incentive for the green projects, as well as GITE, the Green Income Tax Exemption for solar leasing, and recently we launched the Domestic Investment Accelerator Fund for ESG Adoption. This is a grant up to 500,000 ringgit per company on the basis of reimbursable and matching grant between 50-50 or 70-30. So open to all SMEs and MTCs. And you see there are many other incentives and financing or funding available within the government system. In fact, Bank Negara also come up with a low carbon transition facility for SMEs to adopt into ESG projects, a high-tech and green facility, as well as SME automation and digitalization facility, which you can apply through the local banks. Okay, for GITA and GITE, which under MIDA's purview, which is for project investment projects, for Tier 1 is for the green hydrogen project. We have 100% tax allowance against 100% or 70% statutory income, as shown on the screen. And we have Tier 2 for the integrated waste management and EV charging station. Tier 3 for the renewable energy for business process purposes. For own consumption, that they have to go to MGTC for the application. For the own consumption, yeah? This is done by MGTC. And then under the GITE solar leasing, this is also under MIDA. So you see, we put a note there, starting from 1st January this year until 31st December 2026. GITA project, GITA solar leasing submission to be made to MIDA. As for GITA asset submission to be made to MGTC. Yeah? These are the initiatives given by the government to the companies to embark on these green growth projects. And the most recent fund is actually the grant, 500,000 per company. It's matching grant, 50-50 or 70-30 that I mentioned earlier on. So it's open to all SMEs and MTCs based on the standard SME definition. The company must possess a valid manufacturing license or a letter of exemption from MIDA. Ownership of 51% Malaysians, and must be incorporated for the last 3 years under the Malaysia Companies Act 2016. This is the prerequisite. Yeah? So what is it? This is the detail about the IF. This grant is meant for the company to obtain validation and verification of ESG practices, ESG certification, to keep track on their ESG practices as well to keep track on the carbon GHG emissions. So by doing so, we would elevate the local companies to be more competitive and would be much easier for them to secure financing from the banks. Going forward, I believe banks are going to set a standard that 50% of their funding will be given to ESG compliant companies. So this is, SMEs must be mindful about this requirement going forward. Okay, this is basically the eligible expenditure that I explained earlier on. And those on the white side is the non-eligible. This grant is not meant for capacity building. It's purely for tracking of ESG practices and GHG emissions. Okay, this is the flow chart. You can go through it later. I think I already taken out the 5 minutes. And it's the process flow for the grant disbursement. We can further discuss later. All right, so that's for me for the 5-minute slot.
All right. Thank you so much. Extremely comprehensive snapshot, isn't it, for 5 minutes? All right. So moving on next to Ms. Chetna Harish. She will be sharing with us regarding the emerging themes of ESG for businesses, the necessity to transition to a low-carbon economy, and how leaders can take the first step towards achieving these goals for sustainable business continuity. Over to you, Ms. Chetna.
Thank you, Dr. Diana. A very good afternoon to everyone. So let me take this a little bit towards the climate side of things, right? So I heard a little bit from the crowd just now on, how many of you have been exposed to green investing. So let's just start off with a quick view of the climate landscape, right? So if we talk about climate or climate change, right, what would probably be the first thing that comes to mind? Any takers from the floor?
You will get free chocolates. How about that?
Oh, wow. Got incentive now. Okay. So how many of you have heard of net zero commitments by companies? By large corporates? Okay, I see some hands. Nice, thank you. Okay, so let's just bring everything back together, okay? So you've heard of net zero commitments by leaders, right? But what does that mean? That basically means bringing down greenhouse gas emissions that they emit as part and parcel of their business. Number two, how do they do that, right? They have to come up with their own pathway of projects, activities to enable them to reduce those emissions, okay? Naturally then, that brings back the context of investing or green investing, right? A lot of these projects can be linked to some form of green investing. There are a lot of frameworks out there that allows clear identification of these different eligible projects. Okay, so that's basically what green investing is all about, right? Having a green project that's eligible for investment purposes. Now, we talk about green financing, okay? We have NETR that was just launched last year, right? The National Energy Transition Roadmap. The investment requirement between 2023 to 2029 amounts to a whopping 250 billion Malaysia ringgit. Okay? As of last year, interestingly enough, the financial institutions have actually put aside or committed 250 billion worth of investments for ESG projects. Now you see, there is a momentum on the ground already, right? But what happens now is the demand for financing or energy transition by 2050 is 1.3 trillion ringgit Malaysia. That's a lot more than what we would have thought, possibly, right? So if you think about it in that lens, right, you bring it back into the role that financial institutions play, right? They have a significant responsibility and they are able to drive the market needs towards a greener future. Okay? And at the same time, once you talk about the targets, you talk about the projects or the investments requirements, how do you make sure it's accountable? How do you hold companies accountable for these different promises and commitments that they have made? Right? This naturally then comes in the means of reporting, right? In the ESG or the climate space, reporting space right now, by 2024, which is end of this year, all financial institutions must report their climate-related information by end of the year. They've started even since 2022, in fact, right? That will be followed by the non-financial institutions by 2025. So you can see there's a lot of traction on the ground when it comes to climate action, green investing, and all of these help propel the domestic green investment market for Malaysia itself. And Dr. Diana, I pass it back to you.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. All right. So next we will move on to Madam Norliza binti Hashim. I guess she will appear in the screen shortly. So she will be speaking about the bottom-up approach in terms of gender-responsive participatory budgeting, as well as planning and land-based finance to strengthen sustainable urban management. So over to you, Madam Norliza.
Thank you very much, Dr. D, and to the esteemed panelists. Sorry, I'm not with you on the stage. Thank you to MIM for this invitation, even though I'm still very far away, but I'm glad they managed to make this arrangement for me to be virtually there. Probably I got overboard with my slides a bit, you know. I'm seeing my other two panelists kept to their 5 minutes very well, but I wanted to also put in context because when we talk about sustainability, we talk about financing, and I think James, which is, you know, shared a lot of the work similarly with what we do in Urbanist. You know, we go back to the very reason on why all this is currently becoming more and more important. And from the angle on why, sustainable financing is more required is because of how the kind of challenges we are facing today. And one of the biggest challenge of the decade or the future decades will be the urbanization itself. Now, I think when more people live in cities, this is where resources are needed to support urbanization and the needs of our societies. And we also know that, you know, on one hand, we know that cities are very important because they are where most of our economy is contributed to. However, they consume a lot of things, you know, energy, and they also produce a lot of waste, and this probably leads to also loss in tree covers that's increasingly happening, and maybe this could be one of the reasons on why climate change is fast accelerating, inducing all kinds of disasters over the last 10 years, I would say. We have seen much more damaging situation than we've seen before that, you know. So this is why I think we need to have a positive lens as to how urbanization should be the driver and the game changer. And cities, this is where the theme of this whole conference, making cities greener, should be where we are leading our future societies to live in. We also know, that climate change has affected us a lot. The 2021 floods that we had, the Malaysian flood, caused Malaysia property and infrastructure damage of almost 380 million, and agriculture loss of about 190 million in terms of value of losses. So I think, on one hand, we are talking about how to finance, how to invest in sustainability. We must be wary that as we are spending to make sustainability happen, we are also at the same time spending on making good of what the past, or rather our unsustainable practices in the past, have led us to the situation of the climate change. And that is why the Sustainable Development Agenda, the Paris Agreement agenda becomes very important. And over the last few years, the last 5 years, I would say, there's more discussion on how to merge these two agendas together. And not only that, we have the strong support of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which talks about how to align our financing policies with the economic, social, and environment. And here I'm actually attending the HLPF, and the last few days has been discussing about how do we move forward, accelerate the progress, and we must take immediate action and talk about implementation. So we know that it's going to cost us a lot to make things better, and it said that it will cost about 6.4 trillion annually. And I think we are far from making this available. Though we heard Maida saying the availability of these funds, but I think on one hand these are just to move forward from where we are today, but we also have not costed of the damage cost that we need to also spend in making things good. So I think in Malaysia we are very lucky in the sense that our blueprints are quite aligned to the SDGs. We have sort of put our SDGs in terms of 3 phases, which is the 11 plan, 12 plan, and 13 plan. So in terms of blueprints, in terms of national targets, we are quite well aligned, I would say. And in a way, as what Tuan Syed mentioned just now, we do have funding mechanisms in the country. And and we have the Yayasan, we have the My SDG, UN Fund, and of course we have the SDG Investor Map as shared by Maida just now. And all of these are also being supported by a global joint SDG fund. And on top of that, we've heard James talking about smaller grants that organizations are giving, smaller yayasans are doing, and I think all these are very good. But in the space that we work in Urbanese, we've been working with cities, 156 local governments in Malaysia. And one of the main things that we do is try to instill sustainability at the ground. Just very much with what APPGM is doing, but they come and approach it from the parliamentarian angle, from the leadership angle. We look at it from the governance angle, and I think this is a very important platform, because we're sharing it with managers, with people who are interested in how to make sustainable decisions over time. So one of the most important is actually how do we make local governments more able to provide for the needs of the people, and also to manage the risks and disasters. And mind you, I would say from some of the resilience study that we do for some of the local governments, the city fiscal condition is, they don't have budgets actually to manage any kind of crisis, and the amount of budget spent on sustainability program is actually very, very little. And I think this is where what James was trying to allude to just now was, the role of businesses are very important on how to make this happen. And this is where also, being from the local government point of view, I think planning and land-based mechanisms can also be adopted and by coming up with sustainable business model. I think the old way of doing planning development in the country, I think should be relooked. The involvement of landowners, coming together as community, as cooperatives, is something that must come into play in this country. The traditional way needs to be undone, and I think similarly, how do the funding mechanism also supports this kind of initiative, even if the initiative is to be done by the local community themselves. So we seem to have a gap in terms of why, even though we've got a lot of this funding in place, and a lot of these fundings that we observe, they are either too small or they are too big for some of the efforts, And we are looking at how, for example, in a business improvement program, we have seen businesses actually coming and taking action on their own. This is a project or rather a case study in Penang where we saw owners within the Komta area coming together, forming a collaborative partnership, putting in initial funds and getting the government to co-fund some of the projects. And I think this is the kind of approach that we will see happening very much in the future. But we don't want this to be a one-off exercise, something that is piloted. We do want it to be also supported by financial institutions and also, to have it more formalized into the system. And of course, the whole discussion this afternoon talking about ESG, I think from my point of view is that private sectors are already into their ESG, their non-financial objectives, putting that in place. However, for us working in the SDG space, just like James was saying, it needs to be upscale. It needs to be linked to what the city sustainability targets is. So if your businesses in Kuala Lumpur, reach out to Kuala Lumpur and understand what is their goals. If you're in Penang, you must contribute to the local, and it's not just about the organization that is trying to improve its ESG performance. And this is where I think the government also play a role by setting good examples. And I know that a lot of companies are very focused on net zero, but I think net zero is not about the organization, their processes alone. It's about the space that they operate. And I think this is where we want a bigger perspectives on what ESG can contribute towards. And we have a case study in KLCC, Convex area, the convention center. They bring in all their stakeholders together. And this includes Impiana, Mandarin, Malaysian Airlines, and a lot of others there. What's interesting is that they came out with 9 common actions that they want to work together. So we are supporting them, this program, and we are hoping to see more zones like this coming up in various cities where people are taking actions on their own. Business alliances are taking actions to overcome some of the smaller issues that cities needs to converge together with their stakeholders. And we also work on a much local scale, as what James was talking about a lot at the local ground just now. I think one of the very important things we must understand is that we might come from a Malaysian kind of a community, but all our needs are never the same. And we have a saying in the gender group, which is, kelompok yang sama but keperluan yang lain. And I think this is something that we must understand that, even if you have 100 PPRs in Kuala Lumpur, they don't have the same needs. And no project should be, we cannot assume that the needs are similar. And this is why I think the work that APPGM does, and similarly with what we do a lot of social mapping. We do a lot of understanding on what they need. Because at the end of the day, the project goes to them, and they need to understand that how they can be empowered to actually participate in some of these projects. So I think those are very quickly my view on this. Talking about sustainable financing is actually it is very multifaceted. It requires more innovation, creativity, and we need to have a very, very shared vision. I think sustainable urban development is the big game changer for all of us, and we must invest in them, and it's actually no longer a choice, but it is a necessity. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, madam. So to make this session even more interesting, what we have done is we have gathered a set of questions based on the skill set and expertise of our panelists. So I'll be asking them the question, and they will be sharing their views. So once that has been conducted wonderfully, we'll pass over the floating mic to the audience, whereby you guys can start asking them the questions you have in your mind. All right? Okay. So first question is for Tuan Syed Kamal. What are your views regarding the approved investment for green projects in Malaysia for the year 2023 versus the year 2024?
Okay. Under MIDA's purview, there are two types of green projects that we manage in terms of the ML applications or incentives. It's a green projects or the green services, yeah? One is the projects and one is the services. Under the project, we process application for energy conservation or efficiency, for business purposes, and then green building, integrated waste management, RE for business purposes, and under the green services, we process the application for energy conservation, energy generation, green building, and green certification and verification. Yeah. So for the year 2023, for the whole year, the total approved investment was at 3.226 billion ringgit, quite high in terms of number. And for the first quarter this year, 2024, the amount is 341 million ringgit for the first 3 months. So you see the interest on this green project start to show strong interest among the investors. And most of the investment is coming from the foreign investment. Sorry, hold on. For the 2023, mainly the domestic investment on these green projects. Yeah. And for Q1 2024 also, domestic investment. So you see, there's the high level of awareness among our domestic players about this sustainable investment. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. So the next one is for Ms. Chetna. What are some of the main challenges or barriers to scaling up green financing in Malaysia?
So we heard from Tuan Syed that there's been quite a good momentum in terms of green financing, green investing. So in that sense, you can sort of infer that the current landscape or the current market for green financing is actually quite stable. It's a lot more understandable by the large corporates predominantly, who are the ones that's issuing who are the ones getting the financing, so to speak. We do see there are some challenges on the ground, especially with respect to some of the financial institutions. Because sustainable financing, green financing is relatively new in the market, whilst it has been regulated quite well. There are quite a lot of incentives, as Tuan Syed also has shared. And the key crux of the matter still lies on whether or not, number one, there are clear tracking and monitoring of data, right? You continue, the funds will definitely flow, right? But the question is whether or not you're able to make the right decisions supported by these different data points, whether it's data from the lens of the funds that you're investing, the type of projects you're investing, the clients that you have, and even the exact asset level type of disaggregated data. I think that's a clear challenge that we see on the ground, not just from a funding standpoint, but also from a climate standpoint. Then the other thing is also because sustainable financing as a whole is a growing space in Malaysia, right? All the financial institutions have their own commitments when it comes to growing sustainable finance. The challenge then comes about in terms of the roles and responsibilities and the accountabilities within the organization itself, right? A strategy is in place, a target's in place, but whether or not this is aligned well internally, right? So that's two key things that we have seen on the ground. But at the same time, if you notice, there are only these few key, I would say, projects in mind, right? You have energy efficiency, you have waste management, you have water management, you have renewable energies, right? And a lot of these are also piloted or driven by large corporations, right? There is necessarily a competition on the ground, right? Who's going to give the best rates? Who's going to give the best opportunities and financing means to these organizations? So there's going to be some kind of race happening on the ground to be able to secure these different financing, because these sustainable and green financing is very crucial for these financial organizations to meet their own net zero commitments as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So next question is for Madam Norliza. What is your take on considering community needs and aspirations when it comes to sustainable urban management?
I think as mentioned, I mentioned it earlier, and also James mentioned it quite a lot, is that when you talk about sustainable urban management, that means to say how you manage the urban areas. So your biggest stakeholders are the communities themselves. We always go, and that's where I think here in HRPF, there's a lot of discussion about citizens' data or data on citizens, and I think this is where the element on social profiling needs to be expanded beyond what we have today. I mean, today we look at our statistics, we know men, women, how many people, and then we go by our Malay, Chinese, Indian, and others racial distribution, and then we go by large age groups. I think that's not enough. When we look at the SDG lens that we work with, gender needs to be more refined, brought to the, not only refined in terms of the breakdown, but also needs to be more refined to a very local area, and this is something that's missing. For example, when we're addressing zero poverty or zero hunger, we, as a statistics at the national level, we seem to be performing very well. But in reality, every area that we work in, even in a city council area, we do have people who are still poor. We still have people who only eats once a day, And I think this is what we must challenge ourselves on. How do we ensure that this gap can be addressed? We talk about huge investments, we talk about all the big things, but I think we can only be a very successful and sustainable and developed nation if we can address all these small issues on the ground. We still have children having to go to school in some parts of the country, and they have to travel for more than an hour to go to school. They have to be on 2 modes of transportation, and I think these are different needs as that we must try to understand before we can really talk about urban management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. The next question is for Tuan Syed as well. Could you share some information or insights regarding the application status of MIDA's Domestic Investment Accelerator Fund for ESG adoption?
Okay, we launched this fund was in April this year. Okay, as of today, what we require for the companies prior to applying for the grant, they have to do the baseline assessment. So we want the company to assess where they are first in terms of ESG awareness and adoption. As of today, almost 270 companies already registered or enrolled for this free self-assessment to determine their baseline. To our surprise, I could conclude that 75% at zero level, or I call it as non-adopters, from score 0 to 20 points. So you see that is the level of awareness and adoption among our SMEs and MTCs based on those registered with our system. Out of 270, almost 75 to 80% still at zero level. So you see their level of awareness very low. So it's a very, very challenging going forward if we don't work together to push this agenda. You see, end of the day, ESG is just how to measure your commitment towards sustainable practices, organizations' commitments. Yeah? But the end game, we are targeting the net zero by the year 2050. So we need to get everybody to come on board, regardless of the size of your company, regardless of the location of your company. It's a must. So now, how should we address this? It's a big question mark. No? Yeah, there's so much that government can do. You know? That's why in my engagement sessions with the SMEs, I can sense that they don't really comprehend the meaning or what needs to be done with regard to ESG practices. You see, because if you are aware, this ESG promotion been promoted by the capital markets. So all the huge jargons, big words, which not to the understanding of the SMEs. So they don't care about the ethnicity, inclusivity. This is none of their interest, you see. So when we engage with the SMEs, we go to very basic. We look at the element of E. We just tell them, ask yourself, where do you throw your waste? Do you throw into the river, or do you recycle it, or do you have a waste management system? This is one of the ways to get them to understand. On the social part, we just ask them, do you hire undocumented workers? This is very basic. And on the governance, do you have license to operate? Because if you realize, most of the SMEs in Malaysia are actually family owned. The business was started a long time ago by the late grandfather. It started just a business for a hobby at the back of the house. All of a sudden, the business grew so big, and the grandchildren took over without knowing the background of the company, the business. So continue to run. So to me, personally, ESG is a good way to reset the industry. Because most of the SMEs or industry players, the local ones, actually they don't have the right license, for example. Probably they are not aware that they have to get manufacturing license from MIDA if they exceed the threshold of 2.5 million paid up or 75 numbers of employees. And if they below that threshold also, they still have to come to MIDA for the manufacturing license exemption. That one on the manufacturing side. And for the services, they have to get service license from the respective local council. So most of the SMEs are not aware of this. So this is a challenge. So we need to do a lot more engagement. We need to talk to them and tell them, help them to do this. So with regard to our grant, okay, out of this, we told them the score is not going to have any bearing on the applications. Because the whole idea why we are doing the baseline assessment, we want to see where are our industries with regard to ESG practices. That's all. So they can do their online assessment, and then the result will come up with their performance as of today, and what are the gaps in terms of ESG practices, and there's some target goals that they need to address in order to mitigate the gaps. And then they can go and appoint any service providers that meet their requirements and submit the application to us. So as of today, we, out of almost 270 that already enrolled for the self-assessment, we just received about 10 applications. I think there are still a lot of things need to be assessed by their service providers to see their gaps, to address their, and then to come up with their mitigation plan. So it takes a while. But I really urge, if any of the participants here, if you have the companies, go and visit MIDA's website, look into the application, and assess your level of ESG practices. Because you must understand, going forward, for example, if you are part of the global supply chain for the international market, comes 1st January 2026, carbon border adjustment mechanism by EU will be in place. If you fail to comply with the certain requirements, you may have to pay carbon tax. So your product may no longer be competitive in the international market. Okay, because I think about 78% of our exports to Europe, something like that. So be mindful of this new legislation that coming into force by 1st January 2026. So on MIDA's part, we are doing as much as we could to continue to engage with the industry players, to keep them aware, to keep them alert on the requirements going forward. The world is no longer the same. Everybody is competing for the greener environment, greener products. Okay. So on that note, I conclude again. Out of almost 270 companies that registered for our baseline assessment, about 75 or 80% still at the level of non-adopters. So please, everyone, let's work together to support the industry going forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tuan Syed. Okay, next question is for Chetna. How is investor demand for green financing is actually changing in Malaysia today?
So I'll angle it from a few different parts. Number one, from a green bond perspective, okay? The Asian Development Bank did a survey back in 2022, okay? And this survey encompasses institutional investors as well as underwriters, okay? They collectively agree that they are interested and will continue to be interested in green bonds related projects. But what they have cited as a challenge for the growth of the market is essentially on the lack of, I would say, stable pipeline of green projects, okay? Which has then, I would say, caused lower issuance of also green bonds at the same time. Both of these are essentially still talking to the different areas that we spoke about, including energy efficiency, renewable energy, waste, and water. These 4 themes have not changed and do not expect to change in the near future as well. Okay, so in terms of the demand is still there. Okay, now the next area is sukuk. So Malaysia is very much, I would say, unique, right? We have Sharia compliant related investments, and this being married with sustainability elements, you get Sharia compliant investments or sukuks together with environmental and sustainability benefits, right? As of last year, in fact, in the Asian market, Malaysia represented about 30% of the ASEAN green and sustainable loans, sukuk, bonds, etc. So Malaysia, you can see, is already leading in the space. Thirdly, you will also realize that in this space of discussion, you would have heard not just green-related investments, but also about the communities surrounding, right? So what we see at the same time is the rise of social impact investment as well, alongside green investments. So in an instance of a sovereign bond or sukuk, right, the focus was also to look into clean transportation, healthcare, and also education. So these were some of the 3 key themes, I would say, that you would see shifting or continue to gain momentum when it comes to green and sustainable investment. At the same time, there is another area that has, I would say, emerged and sort of quite new in the market. The notion of transition financing. So transition financing is a little different to green financing because, number one, transition financing helps high emitting sectors. So for example, the oil and gas sector, for example, right, to transition to better practices, to help them achieve net zero. But the challenge with that comes in the form of lack of clear guidances and frameworks to tell you what exactly qualifies as eligible product or project from a transition financing standpoint. That is where the conversation is shifting towards, because the green investing space is relatively understood by the corporates and by society, but transition financing isn't yet. And because it's an ever-evolving space, you need to look out for the policies and the emerging technologies that comes alongside it. At the same time, these newer technologies are naturally in very early stages, which then casts doubt on the returns and the fact that there's a need for long-term investments in the space. So I'll conclude by saying that green investments are a lot more understood and mature in the landscape, but probably transition financing is what we should be focusing upon going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next one is for Madam Norliza. What are the key challenges present in Malaysia with regards to advocating versus actual adoption of sustainable urban development?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. D. I think, well, I'm glad there are more and more advocacy being done in sustainability, and many advocates out there, and probably everyone that has come to this conference are believers. If not, they won't be here. But I think adopting sustainable urban development, the bigger challenge is not just the adoption part, I think, Dr. D, is actually more on the implementation part, because what we are seeing now is that, yes, people are adopting better practices, better, like green investing and so forth, but the implementation doesn't achieve the real goal and objective. It doesn't seem to match what's really happening and taking care of what's most important. I mean, let's take, when we talk about, for example, investing in clean manufacturing, for example, I think it's not just about investing in in a greener and cleaner processes, but it's also being more responsible in every stage of that process, and being responsible in terms of consumption is more important, just as important as per more sustainable production. And we are seeing a lot of mismatch in terms of understanding I know a lot of discussion is on ESG, but I speak on the space of SDG, because we have 169 targets in the SDGs. We don't only look at the 17 goals, and this is where adoption of the goals have been done for some time, but the results we are seeing is that only 17% of the goals have been successfully implemented, and that's what the stocktake is saying globally. And probably in Malaysia, in terms of policy adoption, we probably score very high, in terms of data at the national level. We are seeing like 70 to 80% of policies and are being adopted. However, we don't see this success rate at the local level. And in some local government which are more backward, in cities which are more backward, we are only seeing 50%, 55% progress in terms of where they are today. So this huge gap is actually the huge issue on how we translate and understand what the goals wants to achieve. And so I think we cannot take, like for example, even talking about net zero or energy transition, we are looking at the big things, like investing in renewable energy, but we are not consuming in a more responsible manner either, Our per capita consumption is high, our per capita production of waste is high, our per capita consumption of water is high. So I think the first rule in order for us to be more sustainable is for us to make sure that we adopt and be more responsible in how we act, we live. And I think if we are really serious about this agenda, we must look at it in a more holistic manner. Start from us as an individual, start at home, start with our community, and then only then we talk about the city and then the nation. And I think that's where it is. I really feel that we need to start at home. We need to start with the youth, the children. And we have started with programs in schools now, and I think if we can change the youth, we can change the children, maybe we will have a better chance in the future. And I think this is something that we cannot be. We have to implement it at every stage urgently. I think it's not. We cannot go through the cyclical process anymore. We need to intervene where possible. And I think this is where technology can help a lot, because it's proven that with technological advancement, we can probably save time also in terms of advocacy, and also see some better results in terms of how we implement some of the sustainable development. Yeah, so I'm really hopeful that when we're talking about this agenda, we come together in a more holistic manner, so that I think the end goal is the sustainable country or sustainable community. Wherever we live, we want to live in a better place. We want to have a better future. We don't want to have dirty air. We don't want to have to face all kinds of disasters again and again. And I think we cannot do that if we don't look at it in a more holistic manner. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Day.
Thank you, madam. All right, so that was actually a very good round of discussion, isn't it? So now we will open to the floor. Have you guys scanned the QR code and posted your questions? Wonderful. Before we move on to the QR code questions, would anyone like to grab a mic and ask a question live? Anyone? All right. So I guess everybody is a techie in this room, huh? Okay. One moment. As the questions are tabulating, we take a few seconds. All right, wonderful. So we have a question from the floor. Kindly introduce yourself, and then you can ask the question.
Hi everyone, my name is Maheswara. I have a question about EVs. So currently EVs, I think it's a very big thing all around the world. But I think what I realize is that EVs are not very cheap. They are quite expensive. So what is being done to allow EVs to be accessible to like lower income and middle income people? Yeah, thank you.
Very tough for Maida to answer because she's not within our purview. But I understand that the EV price is still 100,000 and above, and this quite mismatched within the level that going for EVs and with the price, because their disposable income much smaller, right? I've been having this discussion as well. The target segment could be those below 40 or 35 and below, but they are earning probably less than 10,000. And to take a loan for 100,000 for 9 years has been quite a burden. But I believe government is moving slowly towards lowering the price of EVs. Going forward, I think Perodua, Proton also going to start looking into a much lower price EV compared to the current imported EVs. So that's all I can explain at the moment. But I think as the industry grows, just like solar, when it first started, it was so expensive. Now they already matured, the price is getting much lower. So I think the same trend will happen to EV market in Malaysia. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, can I just add on that, Dr. D? I think
Yes.
this is my exact observation on the whole issue, I mean, EV was invented to reduce carbon emission, because we wanted to alternate the fuel, But what EV doesn't do is it doesn't take care of the congestion. There's still many vehicles on the road, and I think this is where, what is our objective in this whole thing? It's just not about the emission, it's also about the congestion, because we are losing productivity time on the road because it's still congested. So if there's in China, if you look at it, I mean, I used to work in China in the 1990s, I went back to Beijing last year. It's not only cleaner, but it's so quiet, and it's also not congested, because the EVs are not just for the personal cars, all their public vehicles are EVs. And I think that's where we should be investing in the public vehicles, EVs, because you get more people onto the buses, and you get more public vehicles which are operating on, less combustion kind of energy, so that our air is much better. So yeah, I mean, for those who wants to invest in an EV, I think these are things which, at the end of the day, you're still in the car, you're still stuck there for 2 hours, but and at the end of the day, what are you trying to prove, at the end of the day, you feel better because you're not pumping in petrol, but it's still congesting the streets, So I think this is where the sustainability element is, it's a thing, it goes in circle. The 3 pillars doesn't work on its own, it works together. And I think this is where we need to get our understanding, and that maybe we fail in our advocacy also in that sense, Thank you.
Thank you, madam. It's a total chicken and egg. So, Tuan Syed, get ready. There's a special question for MIDA. The question goes like this. Any halal compulsion for MIDA facilities? Any halal compulsion for MIDA facilities?
We don't focus whether it's halal or non-halal. Yeah? Okay. But of course, for F&B sectors, there's always a segment of halal. In fact, we are working with HDC. We encourage those industries going for halal industry to set up their facilities within the halal park in Malaysia. There are good incentives available for those who are going for halal facilities, be it halal service provider or halal manufacturing. In fact, I was talking to some of the F&B players in Thailand to look into the possibility of setting up their operations in Malaysia to take advantage of our halal certification. Because Malaysia halal certification being recognized by all the OIC countries. So there's a huge market out there. Of course, MIDA will give our normal incentive to any manufacturing and manufacturing-related services activities. Yeah? I don't know whether I'm answering your question or not.
All right, thank you. So the next one, I would like to pose this to Chetna. Is there a simple guide for SMEs to go green with minimal investment and resources?
Answer is yes. There always is a way. I think you need to just focus on 1 or 2 areas at a point in time, right? So we talked about, for example, Tuan Syed talked about undocumented employees, right? Are there any of them in your particular operation? That's something simple that you can manage already. Then the other area is, of course, talking about energy, right? How are you using your energy in your operations, right? Is there a possibility of getting renewable energy or utilizing the LCTF fund to transition, for example? But the idea here is that make things simple, right? When you talk about waste, right, don't look at all the different types of waste that you have. We just focus on 1 or 2 items that you can start with, maybe recycling, right? Sending it to the recycling center, or making your processes or your production processes more circular, right? Meaning getting whatever that is produced as your waste, right, gets incorporated back into your inputs itself. So the idea here is not to look to how the larger corporates are doing it, but really just analyzing what you have as part and parcel of your operations, identifying what could be that 1 or 2 elements within the E and the S space, particularly that you want to tackle at the onset. And then from there, work out a plan to grow as and when you can, and as and when you get the right facilities, the right support, the right resources to enable you to do so as well.
Thank you, Chetna. So the last question is for Madam Norliza, which is quite interesting, honestly. What additional measures does the government have in place to promote ESG adoption among SMEs, apart from the current incentives? If you have any ideas, you can share.
Well, I don't think when it comes to SMEs, I think this is where and a lot of the for now, a lot of GLCs, a lot of the larger corporations, they're the one that's actually very committed. And I think this is where the role of the larger corporations, how do they bring in the SMEs to be part of the whole process. And I think this is where I personally feel that this is where the gap is. I don't know whether there's real incentives at the SME levels. Maybe the SME guys be able to provide better information on that. But when we work with city stakeholders, because that's the angle we come in when we speak to local businesses, and I think they are not really doing it because of incentives only. I think a lot of people that are very committed to the sustainable agenda are people who wants to create change at their level. Either they are working with the communities around them. We know of small industries in Penang just working with the communities that are living around that, and I think these are things that is good to know, and they're not doing it because they are reporting. They're doing it because they want to give back to where they operate, and I don't think they talk in the ESG language so much. And for me, I think while it's good to formalize this, to have more progress reporting from all segments, including SMEs, but it doesn't mean that that's the only pathway that we commit to the sustainable agenda. Whichever pathway that anyone's take, whether as an individual, whether as a community, whether as an SME, I think it all benefits at the end of the day to the bigger good, and I think that's what we want. So I'm not so sure about the incentives part. Maybe we can forward the question to the right agencies. Thank you, Doctor.
All right, Madam.
All right. I just want to add on this. Actually, okay, if we look at the demography of the Malaysian industries, basically I can segregate into 3 categories. The first group is the one that actually they are listed companies. Malaysian companies, they are listed on Bursa. Second category, Malaysian companies are supplying to the anchor companies. They are part of the global supply chain. The third one are the standalone SMEs. Okay, the first category is nothing much that we should worry about, or government should worry about. Because like it or not, they have to comply with the Bursa disclosures, GRI or whatever, or capital markets requirement. The second category, they like it or not, they have to follow the requirement by the anchor companies. Because their emission is scope 3 for the anchor companies. So if they fail to comply, they may be dropped from the supply chain. Okay? So sometimes, I know for a fact, some anchor companies, particularly the MNCs, they do give incentives for their local suppliers to meet the requirement of the ESG or carbon emissions. Okay? That's there already. But our biggest concern is the SMEs, standalone SMEs that I mentioned earlier on. Those started with a family business. These are the ones that we want to encourage to embark on this ESG journey, because it is important for the nation going forward. So as for now, the grant is only available through MIDA. Other government agencies do not have any grants whatsoever for the SMEs to adopt to ESG practices. But in terms of financing, some banks, for example, Alliance Bank, CIMB, they have special interest rate financing for SMEs to embark on this ESG journey. Okay, that's all that I can share at the moment. Going forward, I don't know, perhaps government may have more grants, more incentive, we don't know. we shall wait for the budget presentation end of this year and see if government want to add more to this. All right?
That's a very safe answer. All right. So before we end the session today, are there any inspiring captions that the panelists would like to share with us? Shall we go with you first, Tuan Syed?
I'll always advocate for sustainable practices. So I just want to say that sustainability is a journey, not a destination. So let's hold our hands together and embark on this journey for a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What about Chetna?
Okay, mine works. Thanks. It's a collective endeavor. It's a collective accountability. And it's never too late.
Thank you. And Madam Norliza?
Well, for me, definitely collective efforts is very, very important, but we do need to reinforce. I think whether believing is not enough, reinforcing is very important. And I think in moving forward, we need to progress in a manner that, in an accelerated manner, I think, we are losing time in everything that we are doing. I don't think that we have done a lot, and so we need to do more. So I think this is really a collective effort to move things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so with that, terima kasih and jumpa lagi. We are done.
Thank you, Dr. D. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much to our panelists and moderator for the fruitful discussion just now. As we conclude this session, I would like to invite Mr. Azlan Abdullah, MIM Board of Director, accompanied by Mr. Kabinesh Eliatambi, CEO of MIM, to the stage for the plaque presentation.